Hello and welcome to our second part in a three-part series on using Flowgorithm to write an algorithm. And in this part we're going to have a look at using for loops, and that's count controlled iteration. And so we're going to start by making a simple for loop in Flowgorithm, and then we're going to look back at our maths quiz that we made in a previous video, and we're going to remake it in Flowgorithm using a flowchart. And then at the end of it, we'll have a look at exporting this flowchart into a program that we can use to submit for an assignment or something. Okay. And so what we'll do is we'll start by going over to Flowgorithm now and making a simple for loop that will count from 1 to 10. So over here in Flowgorithm, we can start building up our for loop, and we're going to build up a simple for loop which will count from 1 to 10. And so let's click on the arrow here, and we click on the for part here, so for a for loop. And if we then double click on the symbol here, we can get the properties for the for loop. So if you remember from what you're learning about in Python, for loops have what we call a counting variable. So let's call that counting variable x, and we've got to specify the range over which that counting variable will be iterated. So each time we go through the loop, we're going to increase that variable by 1. So let's start at 1 and let's go up to including 10 here. So that's our end value there. It's important that is the end value there. And so x will include that as well. So we're going to increase by 1 each time. And if we press OK, so we haven't quite finished yet. Let's see what happens when we run the program. And as you can see here, it says the variable x is not declared. So what we've got to do is we've got to think back about how we would declare a variable. Okay, so for a for loop in Python, we write in for x in range, and we put the range of we're going to iterate over it in that. So in Python, when we do that, we're actually casting the variable there, okay, and we're saying what range we're going to iterate over. However, what we need to do for Flowgorithm is we need to we need to declare the variable before we use it in that for loop. So if we declare the variable x, it's an integer, and if we press OK, and then if we could run the program again, we can see there's no problem. Okay, but let's go ahead and add an output, and so let's output the x variable to the screen so that we can see what's happening. And if we press run, we can see here we're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that is the value of x each time we're iterating. And as you can see, we are going from 1 to 10, including 10 there. So let's go over and let's check out what the Python code looks like that Flowgorithm actually generates from this. So here we are. Here's our Python for loop, and it says for x in range 1, and here we are, we've got 10 plus 1, that equals 11, so it's going to go up to, but not including 11. So Flowgorithm is smart enough to know how Python deals with for loops, okay, and how it deals with the ranges. So again, we're going to increment by 1, and each time, of course, we're going to print off x. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go over to our think about how we make the quiz, the maths quiz that we've done in a previous video, and let's see if we can make this in Flowgorithm. Okay, but first of all, we need to think about what needs to happen each time we ask a question in our maths quiz. Okay. let's take a moment just to plan our algorithm. So we're going to have 10 simple addition questions, and so for each time we go through the loop and we ask the question, we need to do a number of things. So the first thing we need to do is we need to generate 2 random numbers, and we'll do some research and find out how to do that in Flowgorithm in a moment. Okay, so we're going to choose 2 numbers, and then the program must add those 2 numbers to get the answer. And then the program must then ask the user the maths question. So it's going to be using those 2 random numbers to ask the question. And then it's going to store that answer that we get from the user in a variable. And it's going to check the user's answer against the answer that we calculated in the previous step. And if the user got the question correct, the program should be award the user a point. So at that point we're going to have to use selection to choose whether the user gets a point or not. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look at how we can make this in Flowgorithm, starting from where we left off. Over here in Flowgorithm, we can continue to use the simple for loop that we made before. And let's go ahead and let's get rid of this output here. We don't need that at the moment. And let's go ahead and let's declare these 2 variables that we need to use for our 2 numbers. And they're going to be integers. And let's go ahead and assign them a random number. So at this point you would go ahead and maybe check to see how you would generate a random number in Flowgorithm. So let's go ahead to Google here and generating a random number, Flowgorithm. And so as you can see here, we can use random and n here and +1. So in this case we're going to want to use numbers between 1 and 10. So let's go ahead and type in here random, and in brackets let's go ahead and choose 9 here, and let's say +1. Okay, so each time we're going to add 1 to it because we don't really want to have a 0. So when it generates a 0, it's going to add 1 to it, meaning that it's going to be a 1. Okay, and let's go ahead and do the same thing for num2, and let's assign that value, and let's random. Okay, so there are our 2 variables now created. And let's go ahead and get the computer to calculate the answer. So we can compare that to the answer given by the user. So let's go ahead and answer equals num1 plus num2. So there you go, that's the computer's calculated the answer. Now we need to go and ask the user the question. So we need to output to the screen the question. And so what we need to do is we need to think about how we're going to stitch these numbers together to make the question. So obviously we're going to use the variables num1 and num2, and we're going to join them together with the symbols, so the plus symbol and the equal symbols. So let's do that. That's num1, and we're going to use plus and num2 and the equals part here. Okay, so that will output the question to the screen. We press OK, and now we need to get the user to type in their answer. So let's make a variable to store their answer in. So user answer, okay, and then if we use the input to get the user to type in their answer, so user answer, and press OK. Now we've got the answer calculated by the computer and we've got the user's answer. Now what we need to do is we need to add the if statement. So we need to use selection. So if the two are the same, if the answer and the user answer are the same, that means that the user is correct. So let's type that in. Let's say user answer equals answer, and if we press OK. So if we got it correct, we want to output to the screen here. Let's output here correct. And so when the user gets it correct, it will say correct. And when the user gets it incorrect, let's say incorrect. Okay, and now our program should work. So let's go up to the top here and let's run that program. So 4 + 1, 5. Okay, let's see if we can get this one wrong. Let's say 15, and it says incorrect. Okay, so far our program is working. It's going through and it's asking those questions each time, and we need to think about now how we're going to get the computer to add up the score. Okay, so obviously we need to have a variable. So let's go ahead and let's declare the variable before we do the loop. So before the loop here, let's double click on that and let's call this variable score. And of course, to start the quiz, we're going to start with a score of 0. And so we need to assign that variable score the value of 0. Okay. And so let's go to the loop here. And so every time the user gets a correct answer, we are going to increment or add 1 to the score variable. So let's go to assign and let's go to the actual properties for this assignment. So let's say score, that's score plus 1. So each time we're going to add 1 to the score. So we take the value in score and we're going to add 1 to it, and we store that back into the variable called score. Okay, and then what we need to do after this loop is finished, we then want to output the total score to the screen. So we're going to output that variable. So let's go ahead and say your total score is, and follow that by putting the variable score in there. Okay, and then press OK. So let's test this out and see how it works. Go to run there. So let's just type in okay, so it says here your total score is 0. Okay, didn't do very well there, unfortunately. So as you can see, we've got our maths quiz there, and we can go through. We can do the maths quiz there. It's a pretty nice application there of a for loop, and we've used some random numbers and some selection there in our quiz. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you've enjoyed going through and using Flowgorithm. And this is our second video in our 3-part series. So we're going to have another video, and in the third video we're going to be using a while loop. So another different kind of iteration there. We've used count controlled iteration in this video, and we'll use condition controlled iteration in our third video. So hopefully you guys can come and join me for our third part, and I will see you later. Thank you very much. Bye.